Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Suzerain. Sorry this series has been so inconsistent when it comes to uploads. That will not be the case going forward because I have unfortunately ended my Victoria 3 series due to technical difficulties that have come back, and I just can't be bothered to deal with it at this point anymore. I don't know what's causing it. It was good for a couple of recording sessions and then it just decided to come back. So, oh well, that's over with, I guess. I'll probably go back to this Vicky 3 at some point in the future, but not for a while. We've got a ton of other stuff that I want to play. So, let's go ahead and hop into... well, you know what? I think we should probably focus first on the Gruni Regeneration and Ecological Economic Nurturing Act. So, the green has been proposed by the Assembly, aiming to encourage a more sustainable approach to industry in Gruni. Section 1 of this act would impose stricter regulations on industrial pollution and waste disposal, particularly in the Gruni region. Businesses not complying with these new standards may face hefty fines, the revenue from which would be invested back into environmental recovery projects. Section 2 proposes to offer tax breaks to businesses that can demonstrate a significant reduction in their environmental impact over a period of time. A small investment fund is created for eco-friendly business practices. Again, as I mentioned numerous times, I've got a wiki up that sort of shows the impacts of some of these decisions. I'm not using it to actually determine any of the impacts, but it is interesting still to go and just kind of look at what some of them are. So if we sign this, the government budget goes down by 1, like it specifically states there. The economic development in Gruni will go down by 1. The opinion of the capitalists will go down by 1. The opinion of the Maldivianists, so the communists, will go up by 2. And the public opinion will also go up by 2. If we veto it, the capitalist public opinion goes up by 1, and the public opinion goes down by 1. It also proceeds to mention that this act basically counteracts the Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act from the previous turn, and that this might be a bill worth pondering if you're doing a Malunivist run, so communist run, but we're not doing a communist run. So in many ways, if I was specifically trying to go that route, we would be signing it, but I did sign this in my personal campaign that I played, that I haven't finished. I haven't even gone back to it since starting this series because I probably confused myself as to what the hell's going on. I don't think it necessarily ended up being for the better. I really don't. I don't think it benefited me in any real way that mattered. Maybe there is a benefit to signing it much, much further down the road, and that was a similar sort of campaign as what we're doing here. It's not really it wasn't a communist run, it wasn't a capitalist run or anything like that. So it's a pretty similar type of campaign that I'm doing here for the actual series. But like I said, from up to at least where I played, it didn't really seem like it had any positive impact for me. So I'm inclined to say let's go ahead and veto it here and see what kind of differences we get. So Green Act vetoed, a pragmatic move. President Anton Rein's veto of the Green Act has elicited positive responses. The president's decision reflects a pragmatic approach, recognizing that while environmental conservation is important, it should not come at the cost of economic stability. This sends a clear message about the need for a balanced approach to our nation's development, one that weighs economic realities against environmental imperatives. Radical, of course, is not a fan of it. President Rein's decision to veto the Green Act has been met with widespread disappointment. In the face of mounting environmental challenges, the act represented a much-needed transition towards sustainable industry practices. It sought to address industrial pollution through stricter regulations and incentive systems to encourage eco-friendly practices. The veto is not only a blow to Gruni, but to the nation as a whole, hindering our progress towards a sustainable future. This move raises concerns about the government's commitment to environmental responsibility. Okay. That looks to be the only thing that popped up from that decision, so let's go ahead and finalization of the drafted constitutional changes. I was walking to my office. Excuse me. I was walking to my office since today was the day to edit and make the final changes for the proposal to change the Constitution of Sordland. The Reform Committee finally bore tangible results, and the draft of the changes were about to be presented to me. I walked in the marble corridors of the palace, thinking about the huge decisions I was going to take. At the entrance to my office, my secretary Livia greeted me. "Good morning, Mr. President." "How are you today?" "Fine, thank you. More importantly, how are you, sir?" "I'm about to make stressful decisions, so not feeling that great." I feel better now that I've seen you, Livia." She averted her eyes away from me and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. President." She paused before taking my coat. It looked like she had something on her mind. "Mr. Rain, can you give me a hint about your reform plans? If you ask me, taking away the judge's immunity is long overdue, but it might anger a lot of people in these halls." "I'll take that into consideration. I hope you'll keep me informed. I'll take your coat now." Livia left to hang up my coat. I entered my office and sat down. Not long after, Peter, Lucine, and Nia arrived. "Good morning, everybody." "Good morning, Mr. President." "Good morning. Time to finally get this proposal going." Peter placed the draft in front of me. "After your modifications, we will be starting the process. Can we go over each of the points that are in discussion for the draft?" "Well, apart from the first two sections of decreasing the Supreme Court's authority and limiting the presidential vetoes, nothing else has been agreed on unanimously. We could start talking about Section 3. This is the impeachment process of the president. Currently, in cases of high treason and breaking the Constitution, the Supreme Court may impeach and try the president. Most reformists want the impeachment to be initiated by the Assembly. They think they do not have any power over potential rogue presidents that would abuse their power. Be inclined to agree, especially considering that we have an unfavorable Supreme Court. Probably don't want them having that power over me, if we're completely honest. I've got a lot more sway in the Assembly, is really the best way to describe it. The Assembly should have oversight over the president. It is the most democratic institution. I mean that too. But if we're just realistic, I also just have more sway in the Assembly, in the event that I were to ever be impeached. This law is particularly dangerous for you in this case. We will be going against the old guard, and if we prove to be successful in the Assembly, they will be looking for anything they can to declare unconstitutional to tackle you. All they need is the Supreme Court to impeach you." Yes, exactly. That's my point. We could remove impeachment altogether. No, that seems like a bad idea. Unless we were trying to get the right-wingers on side. We should define a better impeachment process. Yes, we will be collaboratively working on these specifics. Section 4. This is regarding the appointment of ministers. Currently, the president is free to appoint anyone from the members of the Assembly. Nobody else is involved with the process. There is definitely a demand to involve the Assembly in the process. So, this would be keeping the status quo. 3 seems like it would be probably giving the Assembly... I mean, I guess it depends on exactly what kind of involvement is supposed to be implied here. But it feels like it's probably basically giving the Assembly complete control over the appointment of ministers, which really just does not seem like the kind of thing you want to necessarily do. I would be more inclined to, the idea of, a confidence vote. Me as president, I would be able to sort of say, hey, I want such and such to be my minister of whatever. And then the Assembly can vote on whether or not they think that is a good idea. But they would at the very least not have basically complete control over the appointment of ministers. We could introduce a confidence vote. That was my suggestion as well. I'm sure the reformists would completely support that. The fifth section is about our infamous electoral threshold. Most reformists want to lower the threshold as much as possible. Mr. Richter and his PFJP definitely want to see changes on this topic. They find our 10% threshold to be anti-democratic, which is something I also agree with. Yes, but this is a delicate matter. The party, and I mean not even Albin, wants us to change the threshold. They think that this would destroy our party in the long term. Not wrong. The 10% threshold is what that allowed us to control half of the assembly with around 1/3 of the majority in the elections. But the high threshold is the reason why Swordish politics has become so isolated. I'd be inclined to go with we should definitely work to decrease the threshold for better representation. I agree. Even after Sol's resignation, we still have 3 parties in the assembly. Even Mr. Kiebner's NFP is barely elected. Don't forget that the Communist Party and the Workers' Party of Bludia both had close to 10% vote in the last election. You would be opening their way into the parliament in the future if you were to decrease the threshold. It is important that you realize this. Of course, that would also mean the USP might lose its majority in the assembly, sir. Let's see. Don't worry, with these reforms we'll be even more popular. I hope it works out, Mr. President. Lucian continues to the next section. Section 6 is about the presidential decrees. Reformists demand more limitations to the president's executive power. Mr. Richter has demanded them to be completely removed. I have suggested to bring some limitations to decrees regarding their applicability. While we keep them, we should try to make sure that they will only be used in emergency situations. We should also make it dependent on an enabling act from the assembly. Sure, it would make the whole process longer, but as long as we have a majority, nothing really changes. No, realistically, probably should have some degree of the ability to pass decrees. This seems like a terrible idea because you could potentially end up in a situation where literally nothing is able to get done, depending upon, the party breakdowns and whatnot within the assembly. At the very least, with some ability to use presidential decrees, you would be able to get some stuff done in the event of deadlock, even if it is just temporary measures. I will work with the reformists to limit the use of decrees. Franz will probably demand that we remove them completely, but he forgets that Sordland is a presidential republic. Next one is Section 7, term limits. Term limits are necessary, definitely. I agree. We can't allow somebody like Sol holding on to his seat for 2 decades again. Hey, if people keep electing one person, that means they really are content. The masses are scared of change. Not really. Even Sol knew he had to leave, but we will leave it to the president to decide. Yes, he did, but it took a long time. Now I'll move on to the 8th section. We're reaching the end. It's the question about the immunity of the judges. While the anti-old guard sentiment is increasing, there are talks that taking away their immunity would give us authority over judiciary. I do not support taking away their power for yourself, Mr. President. The judiciary must be independent and long-lasting. While I agree that the current court members are problematic, this is no way to resolve it. The law is supposed to ensure that judiciary's independence by giving legal protection so they can't be pressured. Well, they need absolute immunity in theory, but look at what reality got us. We've got to deal with the most corrupt Chief Justice in the world with no chance to deal with them. Yeah, gotta agree with this one. They should be able to be impeached. Why do I get to be impeached but not them? Exactly. But it would be tougher to persuade the judges with this. Miss Edmund may not want to cooperate with you if they believe you're going to get rid of them afterwards. And the last one is the question about Sol's legacy, basically his Member of Honor law. It gave him absolute immunity even when he was retired. He is a permanent member of the Assembly as well, but luckily he doesn't really attend anymore. According to the Constitution, the Member of Honor not only has legal immunity, but the state also covers most of their expenses as well as providing security at all times. It can only be given to someone by an absolute majority vote in the Assembly and the approval of the President. That's why only Tarkin Sol has that title. He gave it to himself right after his military coup. This law is basically made to save the Colonel, and it has a symbolic importance for Sordland because of it. We must get rid of this senseless law that protects him. He should be able to face justice for the atrocities that had taken place during his rule. I agree. Now this is an interesting one, because we could theoretically let him keep the title, and presumably he would still keep his ability to vote in the Assembly, but we could remove just the immunity. This would allow him to still be charged for atrocities done during his rule. However, it might make it harder, depending on actually, getting those charges through. But this is an option. We would be able to effectively still be able to have him face justice, potentially. Bit of a, slight change. Might not upset particularly the hardliners quite as much as straight up abolishing the position. We'll see what they have to say about this. We could keep the title, but take away the immunity clause. That would be enough to hold him accountable for his actions, but why would you want to keep such a title, Mr. President? It was just a suggestion, Morgana. Or Morgana, excuse me. Morgana. I don't know why I was thinking Morgana. Just randomly inserting an A in there. I'd be inclined to agree with this one, but really it was just sort of a suggestion. There really should just be I was presenting an option. It's just a title, Miss Morgan, or Morgana. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rain decides, we will need to work together to push this agenda. Well, thank you all for your input. After placing the committee's report and my own notes in front of me, I buried myself in the papers. Okie dokie, presidential vetoes. We can remove the vetoes altogether, or we can limit them to a 3/5, or, well, we can limit them and a 3/5 majority can override. According to Articles 77 and 82, the President may veto a bill by returning it to the Assembly with a written statement. The articles do not contain any information on how to override a veto. As a consequence, the President has an absolute veto power that cannot even be overridden with a simple majority in the Grand Assembly of Sordland. Yep, nope. We'll limit vetoes, that makes sense. According to Article 5 of the Constitution, an amendment that has the support of at least 150 signatures may be proposed to the Grand National Assembly. A 2/3 majority vote in the Grand National Assembly and a simple majority vote in the Supreme Court is required for the amendment. As a consequence, the Supreme Court, which is not part of the legislative branch, has voting rights that give them enormous power in the amendment process. Yeah, they don't need that. Impeachment of the President. According to Article 17, the President of Sordland is not responsible for the actions performed in the exercise of presidential duties except in the case of high treason or violation of the Constitution. In such cases, the President may be impeached by the Supreme Court in joint session with an absolute majority of its members. Therefore, the impeachment process only includes the Supreme Court, and it gives them great power over the executive. The Assembly and the Supreme Court may impeach with the majority in both. Appointment of ministers. According to the Constitution, the President appoints the ministers of the Council of Ministers from elected members of the Assembly. We may introduce a confidence vote by adding the line, the President may nominate members, which will require a confidence vote from the Grand National Assembly for their appointment, or include the Assembly more in the process, with the Grand National Assembly may nominate a list of ministers which the President may appoint. Yeah, no, I really don't feel like giving the Assembly the ability to straight up choose effectively my cabinet. That just seems like a stupid idea. They can vote on people I nominate to the position. That makes sense. Okay, according to Article 50, a political party needs a minimum of 10% of the total national vote to win seats in the Grand National Assembly. The votes of the parties who pass the threshold are redistributed proportionally, meaning USP, which currently holds the lead, would be the main beneficiary. Decreasing the threshold may allow the Workers' Party of Bludia and the Communist Party of Sordland to be elected in the next elections. Now, they did mention about the who was it? Was it the Workers' Party of Bludia and the NFP were close to 10%, but not quite? We can decrease it to 8%. In theory, that would probably let them in since they were supposedly close to 10%. Or we can decrease it to 3%, which I feel like that's a very drastic change and probably a terrible idea, especially to do it in one fell swoop. If anything, that seems like the kind of thing that should probably be done somewhat incrementally if you're going to do it. So, yeah, we'll start with just decreasing it to 8%. That seems like a reasonable value to me. And it'll give the Workers' Party of Bludia some seats in the Grand National Assembly, which certainly seems to be one of their biggest gripes, is the lack of representation for, the actual Blutish people. So decrease to 8%. Presidential decrees. According to Article 18 and 51, the President is able to issue decrees on political, social, and economic issues that would carry the force of law. They could not contradict the Constitution and are subject to judicial review. Therefore, the President may issue decrees in many subjects without going through the Grand National Assembly. However, the Assembly may pass legislation on the same subjects to override presidential decrees. We may include the Assembly in the process by requiring an enabling act from the Assembly to be able to enact decrees or remove them completely, making the Assembly the sole law-making authority. Okay. Yeah, definitely removing them completely is a terrible idea, but enabling act, sure, that seems fine to me. Term limits. According to the Constitution, the President shall be elected to serve for 4 years. However, there is no mention of a term limit. Allowing one individual to be able to run, be elected, and serve as President without limits. Introduce a limit of 2 terms. The Constitution gives the justices of the Supreme Court absolute immunity before the law and describes no procedure of impeachment, making them untouchable by the other branches of government. We may describe an impeachment procedure by giving the Grand National Assembly the right to propose an impeachment of a justice on the legal grounds of unconstitutional behavior. Yes, justices may be impeached by the Assembly. Article 99 of the Constitution defines the Member of Honor title and the rights their members may exercise. A Member of Honor has absolute immunity and is considered to be a permanent member of the Grand National Assembly. They are given control of their own personal security team provided by the state's presidential guards. A member is also eligible to live in a special private residence provided by the state for free. The only person who holds that title is Tarkin Sol. We're going to remove the immunity of the Member of Honor. I feel like that's probably the best way to do it. If we want to abolish the title completely down the road, again, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. But bare minimum, especially because I think we'd have a hard time realistically abolishing it completely, just remove the immunity for now. We'll survive with that. After I made the final changes for the proposal, I showed it to my team. They read the changes and discussed it amongst themselves. Lucian spoke afterwards. Looks like the amendments are ready to be proposed. But I have to say this too. The new electoral threshold will be really difficult for the party to accept. Our guys are not fond of that idea. That's true, it'll be tough to get all their support. Some of our members may try to openly fight against this. I'll make sure the party follows me. We will all do our best to make it work, sir. Any other comments before we proceed? I will say that I do not agree with the new law that gives the Assembly the power to impeach the judges of the Supreme Court. And again, Morgana, I think you're an idiot for that. I really do. I don't know why you do not believe that the judges of the Supreme Court should not be able to be impeached. That seems silly to me. I'm also against the Chief Justice as an obstructionist behavior, but even if we get rid of all of them, the new judges will be less independent with this law. They will be scared to go against the administration when it's needed. No, they have no reason to be scared to go against the administration when it's needed, for one simple reason. It still requires the Assembly. The Assembly! You're assuming I'd be able to get enough people in the Assembly to be willing to impeach in the first place, and there is absolutely zero guarantee of that, especially when you combine the fact that we've lowered the election threshold from 10% to 8%, so we're going to have two other parties that are potentially hostile to us joining the Assembly next time around. Let's just be real here. We're probably not going to be able to impeach the judges if we really wanted to, unless they did something very egregious. They need their protection to do, and I fully disagree with that, and I think it's bullshit to think that they need to have immunity to be able to do their jobs. No. That seems stupid. But I guess Morgan is not quite as big into the whole nobody's above the law as she would lead on. Otherwise, the new ones will be pawns just like Soul's old guards. No, not really. But it's more important that we get rid of the old guards, Miss Morgana. After the obstacles are gone, we can strive to make it better. However, he turned to me, you have to be careful, Anton. I'm sure you'll be fine, but with all that's happening out there, we'll need to prepare against these threats one way or the other. I am aware. Well, I think we can proceed now. I will personally work on the wording of this proposal with my hand-picked legal experts. With Miss Morgana's reputation as the most experienced attorney, this proposal will be bulletproof. Chief Justice Orso will have a hard time convincing others to oppose it. In the meantime, you must introduce this proposal to our party. You will need to get them to back us if we want it to pass the Assembly. Sir, I advise you to first talk to the leaders of both conservative and reformist wings of the party. As far as I'm aware, Mr. Clavin supports the reforms already. Miss Tory will be the real problem. She became the real heavyweight after we left for the executive. Any advice in regards to dealing with them? As Mr. Vectorn said, Mr. Clavin will probably be easier to persuade. We need to unite the party under this, so his support is vital. Miss Gloria will be tougher to break. I thought it was Miss Tory. Oh, Gloria Tor. Okay. Okay. You referred to him by his last name, but you referred to Tori by her first name. Okay, Lucian, that seems a bit weird. The problem is that she's capable of turning the moderates and the conservatives against us. As much as I don't want to say this, if she makes demands to change the proposal, you may need to give in. Thanks for the advice. Wish you good luck with the party, sir. I think we can end the meeting here. But Lucian, you're forgetting I'm also going to have the support of the PFJP. They will almost assuredly, for the most part, support this, because it may not give them necessarily everything they want, but don't let good be the enemy of perfect. Or don't let perfect be the enemy of good, whatever the fuck the saying is. You know. As the Rolling Stones song goes, you can't always get what you want. We all shook hands and I left the room. Okay, let's see. Rain leading promised reforms. Our sources informed us that the plan is underway by the government to start the drafting of the reform package. Finally, we seem to have a president who pursues something significant in the early days of his term. President Rain is already proving that he is the right man for the job, as rumors circulate about successful talks about a future proposal and collaboration with important figures from the PFJP. This is a significant development that shows that this administration is listening to the will of the Swordish citizens. We hope that once the constitutional changes are approved, It'll be the start of a new era for our country towards a bright future. Unleashing energy and analysis of EPA's potential, recent data-driven forecasts, yada yada yada. We propose an intriguing strategic move. The government should contemplate a co-investment. It seems a bit late for that, because didn't we already basically tell Gaston that we're going to be 100% in on? We're not going to be sharing with Rizia? I swear we already did that. This seems like a very late newspaper economist. I think your writers are crap. Preparations underway for the annual Benfey Festival. The newly built Benfey High Arts Center with a total capacity of 8,000 people. Okay, sounds good. Let's see, what do we got? That's reading reports. It's dinner with the business council guys. Okay, let's see. Reform committee started preparations. The needed 150 signatures from the proposal has started to be collected within the USP. Okay, we need 150. Fortunately, the game doesn't tell me how many we have. I don't think it tells you that anywhere at all, which I feel like is an oversight. But maybe that's just me. But, you know, if we look at this, we need 150. Okay. So we got 130 of our party. Let's be real here, we're probably not going to get all of them, if we're completely honest. Highly unlikely that we would get all of our party on board, because some of them are much more conservative than, and will be upset with these reforms. We know that. Unfortunately, the game does not necessarily break down that, how many of them are conservative and how many are reformists, which I feel like is a bit of an oversight, in my opinion, but okay. We will almost assuredly get basically all of the PFJP on board, just because of the reforms. Again, they may not necessarily be getting everything they want, but they, you know, you can't always get what you want. So realistically, we'd probably get a large majority of them. We're not getting any of the NFP. It's just not happening. We might get some independents as well, especially because of the whole lowering the election threshold, because this independence comprises people like the Workers' Party of Bludia and the Communist Party, which isn't listed here. The Workers' People Party of Bludia, or whatever the hell their title is, I don't recall. We'd presumably also probably get basically all of the independents on board as well, mostly just because most of them probably like the vast majority of the reforms, and they're especially going to like the decreasing of the threshold. So I would expect that unless we completely fuck this up, we should probably be fine in terms of getting this to pass. Okay, I think I'm going to end this part here a bit early. I've got about 11 minutes left on the clock, and I don't think either of these events are less than 11 minutes. So we're going to end this part here. I will see you all next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.